Welcome to the Durham County Council Cabinet meeting for July 2020. My name is Councillor Simon Hennig, and today's meeting is taking place on Wednesday the 8th of July and being recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. Can I give a warm welcome to members, officers and members of the public and media who are watching the live feed of this meeting. This is the second Cabinet meeting since our resumption in this format. I will run through the housekeeping issues briefly. If I can ask people only to speak when invited to speak by myself as chair, to keep your microphone on mute at all times unless invited to speak. And if you do wish to speak, please type RTS in the chat function and that will indicate to me that you wish to speak. And please bear in mind that all participants can see the messages in the chat function. Once invited to speak, please do introduce yourself with your name and position unless you've already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. And I would advise also that Councillor Alan Napier, Deputy Leader of the Council, will take over in my absence if for any reason I lose my connection. I would like to advise that all members of the Cabinet are present. Can I also offer our warm welcome to Amy Harhoff, the Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, to her first meeting of the Cabinet. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Heather Smith, the Chair of Children and Young People's Scrutiny, who will be presenting a report later in the agenda. There has been one request from a member to ask a question, and that is on item 10 from Councillor John Shuttleworth, and I'll be bringing in Councillor Shuttleworth after that report is introduced. Before we commence the formal items of business this morning, can I once again, on behalf of the whole Cabinet, convey our thoughts and condolences to all of those who have lost loved ones in recent weeks. I would also like to mention that this week is Memorial Week for the 25th anniversary of the Bosnia-Srebrenica genocide, which took place in July 1995, when 8,000 men and boys were killed. We stand alongside Durham Cathedral and Durham University in commemorating the 25th anniversary, and flags will be flown from County Hall, Durham Cathedral and Durham Castle during this Memorial Week. So if we can now move to the items of business this morning. Item 1 is public questions. There were no questions that were submitted by the deadline for questions. So I'll move on to item 2, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of June 2020. Can I ask if members will agree these minutes, please, as a correct record?
Agreed.
If there's any thank you. If there's any dissent, can I ask members to use the chat function, please? There is nothing showing, so we can confirm the minutes are agreed. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Can I ask, please, if there are any declarations from members? Councillor Lucy Hobbles.
Thank you, Chair. Just as an introduction, I'm the ward member for the Trimden and the Thornley ward. I do have an interest in this item. I did go to school and at this particular school, and also it's in the ward that I represent. I also have a great granddaughter who has now got a place to start the Bluebell School. So I think I'll be leaving the meeting and I'll be coming back after it's been considered and joining the meeting in item 5, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hobbles. That's an interest for item 4, which is the next item. Can I just check there are no other declarations of interest, please? If not, we will then move on to item number 4, which is proposal to close the Trimden Grange site of Bluebell Meadow Primary School on the 31st of August 2020. And I'm going to ask John Pearce, the Director of Children and Young People Services, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. John Pearce, Corporate Director, Children and People Service. So the report sets out the proposal around Bluebell Meadow Primary School. The school is currently subject to a Directive Academy order, which was as a result of an Ofsted inspection that rated the school as inadequate. The Department for Education subsequently identified Eden Academy Trust as the sponsor for the school, and the school is due to become part of that multi-academy trust from the 1st of September 2020. All pupils of statutory school age have already been consolidated onto a single site in Trimdon Village, and that happened in January 2020, and the Trimdon Grange site has continued to provide a base for nursery and preschool age children. There have been significant maintenance issues with the Trimdon Grange site, and pupil numbers have fallen substantially since the previous reorganisation in 2016. Undertaking the statutory process and the recommendations set out in the report to close the site will enable the academy conversion to be completed on the 1st of September 2020, and the educational and financial risks of not proceeding with the academy conversion are set out on the report. And I would just state this is a Directive Academy order, so this isn't an academy order that the council has any choice in following. If Cabinet agree to the recommendation, the Trimdon Grange site will remain with the council rather than transferring to the Eden Academy Trust as part of the conversion process, and any decision on future use of the site will be required once it is ceased to be used for education provision. An initial consultation was carried out between the 9th of March and the 3rd of April, and consultation was undertaken with governors, staff, parents and the wider community. And because of the circumstances around the pandemic, that consultation was done virtually rather than face to face. A total of 15 responses were received, 4 responses in support of the proposal, 11 not in support of it, and details of the consultation and responses received are outlined in paragraphs 15 to 20 of the report. And the majority of the responses didn't address the immediate educational reasons for the consultation. Following consideration of the outcome of that initial phase of consultation, a decision was taken on the 8th of April 2020 by myself as Corporate Director with delegated powers to approve the issuing of statutory notice to close the Trimdon Grange School with a date for closure of the 31st of August 2020. That statutory notice was in place for a 4-week period and received 3 comments. All of those comments were opposed to the proposal. The comments that were received in that stage reiterated some of the concerns from the initial phase that dated back to the initial reorganisation in 2016, but didn't address the educational reasons for this current proposal. Therefore, the recommendation is to proceed with the closure of the Trimdon Grange site on the 31st of August, and this recommendation is set out in paragraph 11 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I now ask Councillor Olwyn Gunn, please, to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report asks Cabinet to agree the proposal to close the Trimdon Grange site of Bluebell Meadow Primary School on the 31st of August 2020. The report outlines the financial and educational difficulties the school has faced in recent years, and the school being judged inadequate by Ofsted in May 2019. Because of this judgment, conversion to academy was a government requirement. The academy sponsor secured by the DFE, Eden Academy Trust, Hartlepool, will only agree for the school to become part of the trust if it has responsibility for only the building and site of the former Trimdon Junior School. It's believed that the best way of improving education outcomes and easing the pressure on the budget will be most effectively achieved by Bluebell Meadow Primary School operating on one site rather than 2. Reference is also made in the report to the fact that all pupils, with the exception of nursery pupils, have been taught on the Trimdon Village site of Bluebell Meadow Primary School since January 2020, and this arrangement is working well. The report details the consultation undertaken by the Council on the proposal to close the Trimdon Grange site and the responses received to that consultation. Although there has been a limited response to the consultation and a statutory notice, and the majority of responses received were not in favour of the proposal, there have been no educational reasons put forward as to why the Trimdon Grange site of Bluebell Meadow Primary School should not be closed on the 31st of August 2020. Chair, I recommend the report and the decision. It asks Cabinet to agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gunn. Can I now ask Councillor Surtees, please, to speak to the report? Thank you. You're muted, Councillor Surtees. If I can just ask you to unmute.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Gunn has set out clearly the issues that Bluebell Meadow Primary School is experiencing, and responses to the consultation have not led to any other options being offered. The proposal to close the Trimton Grange site of Bluebell Meadow Primary School is unfortunate, as the closure of any well-established school building always is. However, this is the only option to ensure the future and long-term viability of this school. I formally second the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I've seen no other indications to speak. The recommendations are set out in paragraph 11 of the report. Can I ask, please, if everybody agrees to the report and recommendations?
Agreed. Agreed.
That's agreed. Thank you for that. And thank you to all those who obviously took part in that consultation. Can I ask and check, please, that Councillor Hovels has been brought back into the meeting before I move to the next item?
Morning, Chair. I've just called for Councillor Hovels to come back into the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. We will move on then to the next item on the agenda, and that is item number 5, St Bede's RC Comprehensive, Peter Lee. Again, if I can ask John Pearce, Corporate Director of Children and Young People's Services, to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So St Bede's Roman Catholic Comprehensive in Peterlee has been supported by the Northern Saints Academy Trust, which is now known as the Bishop Chadwick Catholic Academy Trust since January 2015. This report has provided a significant level of leadership capacity and remains in place, and has also had very positive impacts on both standards and sustainability during that period of time. In 2015, when this relationship was established, there was a significant risk to the viability of the school due to falling pupil numbers that was linked to poor standards and educational outcomes. Any closure of faith school of this size and in this locality would have placed significant strain on pupil placement in other schools. There was not sufficient spare capacity in County Durham to disperse pupils to existing schools, and the council would not have been able to meet its sufficiency duties to provide education within a reasonable travelling distance of home. Due to these exceptional circumstances, the sustainability of the school from both an educational and financial perspective have been really critical, and the council has worked closely with the school and with the Academy Trust to mitigate the risks to the school. This has included an agreement for the school to set a deficit budget in recent years on the basis that it considered alternatives for a longer-term sustainable model of provision. The leadership from the Academy Trust has had a significant impact upon accelerating the school's improvement journey, and this has been reflected through their Ofsted outcomes, with a good judgment being attained in 2017. This has in turn started to impact on pupil numbers, and in recent years pupil numbers have started to increase to far more sustainable numbers. However, there is still a legacy of low numbers in the higher year groups that predates the work that's been undertaken. The schools continue to prosper in the relationship with the Academy Trust, and outcomes for 2019 were excellent in terms of progress and attainment, ensuring the school is a really strong provider with some aspects of outstanding progress. As a result of the low pupil numbers in recent years, the estimated accumulated deficit as at 1st of October 2020, when academy conversion is planned, would be £1.6 million. The increase in pupil numbers since 2018 will help to move the school to a far more sustainable financial position over the medium to longer term, but this will take some time to come to fruition. The Trust now wishes to accelerate the academisation process to ensure the stability is brought to the improvements have been made and consolidate the future sustainability of the school. This is also in line with published diocesan academy policy, which is described and set out within the report. Whilst the school continues to operate an in-year deficit as pupil numbers recover, following academisation, if the recommendation is agreed by Cabinet today, that financial liability for future years will transfer to the Academy Trust from the school and from the council. To enable the transfer to proceed, Bishop Chadwick Catholic Education Trust have requested that the council write off the school's accumulated deficit at the point of transfer. As previously stated, that's estimated to be in the region of 1.6 million. This reflects the significant support and time invested within the school and local community, and most importantly, it will secure the future of the school and the outcomes that pupils are now achieving in that community. The report sets out the financial implications of this proposal. An earmarked school reserve has previously been set up to cover the financial risk of the accumulated school deficits in these circumstances, and it's proposed that if the recommendation is agreed, that earmarked reserve will be utilised to meet this one-off cost associated with the transfer. The recommendations are set out in paragraph 18. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Again, can I bring in Councillor Gunn, please, to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an overview of the educational aims and plans for academisation and Catholic education in the Diocese of Hexham and Newcastle, and it also reviews the financial impact of the academy conversion of the last maintained Roman Catholic secondary school, St Bede's RC Comprehensive School in Peterlee, and its conversion to join the Bishop Chadwick Education Trust. The Academy Trust has been supporting St Bede's in Peterlee since January 2015, as the school was unable to attract a suitable head teacher, was experiencing falling numbers linked to poor educational outcomes that presented significant risks to its future sustainability. The leadership provided by the Trust has had a positive impact on St Bede's. Progress was initially reflected in the April 2015 monitoring visit, and outcomes improved significantly in 2015 and 2016 to secure a good overall Ofsted inspection in February 2017. The school has continued to prosper under the guidance of the Trust, and outcomes for 2019 were excellent in terms of progress and attainment, ensuring that the school is a strong school with some outstanding aspects of progress. Pupil numbers were initially slow to respond to the improvements made at the school, but since 2018, first choice applications have increased significantly on previous years, and pupil numbers are now on the upward trajectory. Whilst the Academy Trust have been interested in formalising the arrangement with St Bede's, the financial situation and pupil numbers have prevented this happening. The Trust are now seeking to proceed with academy conversion and have requested Council to write off the significant cumulative deficit, which would enable a permanent solution for St Bede's and secure its future. Pupil numbers indicate that the school will continue to operate an annual financial deficit for a minimum of 2 years, while the improved admission numbers work their way through the school. If the recommendation is approved, this financial liability will be transferred to the Academy Trust. Improvements in outcomes and the reversal of falling pupil numbers could not have been achieved without the strong commitment of the Academy Trust over the last 5 years. And without this arrangement, the school was moving to an unviable position with poor education outcomes. The Council has a statutory duty to provide sufficiency of school places and for the educational outcomes for all children and young people in County Durham. And this recommendation, Chair, will enable us to meet those duties and, most importantly, provide a bright future for the school and our children and families living in the community. The legal implications and the Council's duty to exercise its education function are to be found in Appendix 1. I move the recommendations, Chair, set out in paragraph 18A and B. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gunn. If I can now ask Councillor Napier, please, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, everyone. I'm Alan Napier. I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council. I also hold the finance portfolio within the Cabinet. Chairman, Councillor Gunn has set out the rationale for proposals put forward by St Bede's Comprehensive School to academise as part of the Bishop Chadwick Catholic Education Trust. The estimated deficit at the point of conversion is set out at paragraph 7, totaling an estimated 1.6 million. And the report recommends writing off this deficit from the school's earmarked reserve in order to deliver a financially viable future for St. Bede's. The school has started to move onto a more sustainable footing with support over a number of years from St. Wilfrid's and the council. And I am pleased that there has been a continued focus on improving educational outcomes for children that attend the school. The proposed deficit write-off will enable the school to convert, although as we all know, there are many pressures facing all of our schools across the county. I wish the school well as they look to continue their improvement as part of the diocesan trust arrangements that are in place. Chairman, I'm happy to second the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Napier. I have I'm not aware of anybody else wanting to speak on this item, and nobody is indicating. The recommendations have been moved and seconded. Can I ask if the recommendations and reports are agreed, please?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We'll then move on to item number 6 on the agenda, and this is an overview and scrutiny review of elective home education in County Durham. We're very pleased to welcome Councillor Heather Smith, Chair of the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, who will present the report and its recommendations. Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Cabinet, for receiving this report. This was a scrutiny review undertaken by the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Committee into elective home education in County Durham. The number of children being educated at home has been steadily rising for some years, nationally as well as locally. The aim of this review was to investigate the elective home education offer in County Durham, offered by the County Council, to establish the level of elective home education in the county, including a data overview, to determine whether children who are home educated are receiving a suitable education, and to determine whether the children who are home educated are supported, safeguarded and protected from harm, and how the local authority works in partnership with other agencies. I think we were surprised as a review group that the legislative framework for elective home education is weak. There is no requirement for children to receive the national curriculum or indeed any curriculum in home education, but to receive a suitable and efficient education with no definition as to what that comprises. Over 6 meetings, the review group considered information from Children and Young People Services and colleagues in health services and police, relating to how they work together to follow elective home education policies and practices and to provide better outcomes for children who are home educated. There's an education at home group in the county, which is multi-agency and has robust arrangements to ensure that children are seen and that there is a single point of contact for each family. In gathering evidence, the review group met with parents and conducted a short survey with parents who were known to be home educating or to have done so. The response rate was low, only 7%, but it gave us some valuable insights. Following the examination of the evidence, the review group produced the report that you have seen today, and there are 5 recommendations which relate to the need for a common framework to improve oversight of the quality of education and safeguarding of children who are home educated. We feel this should include a national register of children being home educated, and this is something that the NSPCC has been calling for. 3 of the local further education colleges work in partnership with the Education at Home group to enable children who are being educated at home to access vocational and core GCSE courses. This has proved successful, and we would like to see this partnership extended to all the FE colleges across the county. We would like to encourage further working in partnership with schools to promote high understanding of the needs for children with special educational needs and disabilities, and provide appropriate training where needed. Children with special educational needs and disabilities represent 1 in 7 of the school population, but amongst the children being home educated, it's 1 in 3. And one of the principal reasons that parents who responded to our survey said that they were educating their child at home was their perception that the child's special educational needs and disabilities were not receiving the appropriate support at their school. We want to encourage schools to share information that they receive from parents about why their child is being removed from school to be home educated with school governors in the head teacher's report. Many parents replied that bullying was a reason for them removing their child from school, and we feel that it's important that this information is shared with governors and that there's continuous review of school anti-bullying policies. And finally, we would like there to be an annual event for children and families who are home educating to encourage engagement with the Education at Home service, for families to interact, to meet officers, to gain further information about what resources are available, and for the children to have an opportunity to socialise. So I would like to ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations on page 6 of the review report, and within 6 months provide a review of the progress made against the recommendations within the review report. And finally, I'd like to thank the review group members, all the representatives from the council, partner agencies, the parents, carers and children for their valuable contribution to the review. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for summarising the report, and I'm sure we also as the Cabinet would want to pass on our thanks to everybody involved in this piece of work. I'm now going to ask Councillor Olwyn Gunn to speak, please, and also to speak to the reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to thank the Chair of Children and Young People's Services Overview and Scrutiny, and all of the members of that committee, and indeed everybody who has participated in this very welcome review. I welcome it not least because as a member of Scrutiny prior to taking the portfolio for Children and Young People's Services, this was an area of work which I believe demanded a focus. What the review does is provide an effective and timely challenge in an area where our staff have been working hard to improve support for families who choose to educate their children at home. The education of all young people is a priority, and we need to make sure that children who are educated from home have access to an education that is suitable to meet their needs and is appropriate for the child's age, ability, and aptitude. In the current climate, this is all the more important, as a much larger number of families are currently educating at home than we ever expected. As a Cabinet member, I work closely with the staff team who support families who are home educating, and I will continue to actively work with and lobby government to provide strong but proportionate arrangements to assure the suitability of home education and, importantly, the safeguarding of children and young people. Locally, The service will continue to widen access to vocational and core GCSE courses for children who are electively home educated. I particularly welcome and support the recommendation to continue to ensure a good level of understanding in relation to special educational needs and disabilities across all school settings. And the service will continue to work to encourage schools to take up training offers so that those schools can effectively meet their statutory duties through staff who understand special educational need disabilities and are well equipped to meet the needs of pupils. Turning to reporting of elective home education, I welcome the recommendation to develop a good practice reporting tool to support discussion at governing bodies on elective home education, including any concerns around bullying, and to ensure that school policies, including anti-bullying policies, are regularly reviewed. It is important that governing bodies are aware of their home educated children. And we will also introduce regular events for families who home educated in line with feedback from parents given as part of the review. Access for parents to other council services is also important, and we will continue discussions with library, culture and sports services to develop further opportunities for children educated at home. This is an excellent review. Chair, I endorse the review report and I move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gunn. If I can now ask Councillor Joy Allen, please, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. A quality education for all our children across County Durham is a key priority, and I welcome the recommendation in the report to lobby for a common framework to improve oversight of both the quality of education and the safeguarding of children and young people who are electively home educated. More engagement with families who home educate their children will help us better understand how we can help to further improve home education experience and enable us to understand how the council can support them on their educational journey. I would also like to thank Councillor Smith and the committee for the thorough review that has been undertaking. I believe that the recommendations that have been made will improve our understanding of the needs of home educated children and young adults and will allow us to continue to work with families and support them as effectively as possible. I am happy to second the recommendation in the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. Can I just check, please, that there's nobody else from the Cabinet who wants to come in? Nobody else has indicated. Can I ask Councillor Smith if there's anything else you want to add or respond to?
No, thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That being said, the recommendations are set out in paragraph 6 of the report. Can Cabinet agree the recommendations, please?
Great.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith, you are of course welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish, or not, as you wish. But thank you again for your report this morning, and again, if you could convey our thanks to all members of the panel, please, for their part in the review. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
If we can now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 7, high needs block funding for SEND and inclusion support. Again, I'm going to ask John Pearce to present this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the report provides Cabinet with an update on the spend and pressures on the high needs block of the Dedicated Schools grant, which is used to support children with special educational needs and disabilities. This builds on the last report that came to Cabinet in January 2020. The report provides the 2019-20 financial outturn position, along with the proposed 5-year financial plan to try and ensure high needs block spend is kept within available resources, and that we're also able to address the deficit and the accumulated deficit that is currently in place. The report contains an update on the key work areas and the planned next steps on high needs block sustainability work, and these were described in the last Cabinet report. There are 9 areas of work that are ongoing and proceeding. As has previously been reported to Cabinet, a combination of the financial challenges across the public sector over the last 10 years and the implementation of the SEND reforms in 2014 have led to almost a perfect storm around support for children with special educational needs and disabilities. This has led to very substantial increases in the numbers of children with education, health and care plans, and led to the position where insufficient resources have been available to meet those needs. The final outturn position for the high needs block in 1920 is slightly improved from that reported in the January Cabinet report, with an overspend of £8.6 million for the year compared to the previous forecast of £9.4 million. As previously agreed, the Council will fund £5.6 million of this overspend from reserves, and the balance of £3 million will increase the cumulative deficit position on the high needs block reserve. Local authorities are required to submit a deficit recovery plan to the Department for Education if the cumulative deficit is in excess of 1% of the overall DSG allocation. The improved year-end position alongside the surplus within the other 2 blocks of the dedicated schools grant means that the overall deficit position of £3.8 million that will be carried over to next year is below the requirement to trigger the deficit recovery plan, so there'll be no requirement for the Council to do so in the coming financial year. Despite an increase of approximately £8.8 million in high needs block grant funding available for the 2020-21 financial year, forecasts still show insufficient resources to support the predicted expenditure in future years and also to bring the high needs block back in deficit back into balance. To address this, a 5-year financial strategy will be critical, and across the 9 work streams that are in place that are described in the report, they will all be working towards providing efficiencies within the system to try and reduce the financial strain on the high needs block. The budget plan for 2021, with the additional government funding that has been provided, and also the planned reduction of high needs block expenditure in comparison to 1920, means that it is projected that high needs block expenditure will be £0.2 million lower than the grant allocation in 2021. However, this is dependent on demand pressures, and we know during the current period that there are a number of unknowns that may well impact over the remainder of the year. The sustainability plan that I've referenced is set out in the report between paragraphs 42 and 74, and that shows the progress that's being made against each of those work streams. So, subject to Cabinet approval, it's proposed that the SEND and Inclusion Resources Board continues to oversee the implementation of the work programme to deliver the proposed changes across the 5-year plan, and also for them to monitor any impact of the coronavirus outbreak and any future demand pressures that may bring with it. It's planned to update Cabinet again on spend, forecasts and progress in the winter of 2020-21, and the recommendations are set out in paragraph 13.
Thank you. Can I again ask Councillor Gunn, please, to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. In January, Cabinet looked at the position with the high needs funding block and agreed a number of recommendations relating to the findings from extensive consultation which took place in the summer and autumn of last year. We've welcomed the additional funding from the government into the high needs block for 2020-21, but we remain challenged by the resources available to us for some of this work, which supports services for children with special educational need disabilities and those who need alternative arrangements for education. Cabinet colleagues will be aware I have written to the Secretary of State on a number of occasions about this, and last wrote in early March last year. I'm writing again to request that the Secretary of State gives attention to this as a matter of urgency. And I raised it with head teachers, governors and trade unions at the Schools Forum last week, and I have their support in urging him to support our SEND services and address these very, very critical issues that we are facing. Like many other local authorities, we continue to be in this situation through a number of reasons. including the long period of austerity, government funding not previously keeping pace with demographic and inflationary demands, the fact that government reform has extended the age range of young people we are required to support up to the age of 25, and the changing and increased complexity of needs of our children and young people. This is a national issue, and parents and trade unions have, as well as local authorities, called for the funding crisis to be addressed. I welcome the progress that this report outlines and the 5-year financial plan, which seeks to help us address the deficit which has built up to date. Collectively, the work outlined will seek to help us to try and make the resources more sustainable without having a significant impact on the support we provide for the children and their families. But I have to stress that this does remain an ongoing challenge. This is an area of funding we must keep under regular review and continue to state our case to the government to fund at a level to enable us to meet the growing needs of the country's children and young people. This will be particularly the case in the light of the coronavirus outbreak and the impact this may have in coming months on our most vulnerable children. I support all the recommendations, and I feel it's important that Cabinet receives a further update report later in the year. Perhaps by then, the pleas of parents and local authorities and unions will have been heard, and we will have received additional government funding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gunn. If I can now ask Councillor Alan Napier, please, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chairman. I have previously reported to Cabinet the significant pressures facing our high needs block budgets, which supports children with special educational needs and disabilities. Cabinet will recall that the Council agreed to fund 5.6 million of the overspend from the General Fund on a one-off basis in 2019-20. However, even with this commitment, the deficit on the High Needs Reserve has risen to 5.7 million at the 31st of March 2020. The proposals set out in the report are an important part of ensuring that the services we are providing meet the needs of young people whilst managing expenditure within the funding that is available. As Councillor Gunn has said, in the longer term, this is an area where government need to provide a sustainable funding settlement, and I would again urge them to consider this area carefully as part of the upcoming spending round for local government. Chairman, I'm more than happy to second the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Again, if I can just check if there's anybody else who wishes to speak. I can't see anybody indicating. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Can I ask if those are agreed, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We then turn to item 8 on the agenda, which is inspection of SEND services. Again, if I can ask John Pearce to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the report informs Cabinet of progress across County Durham with the special educational needs and disability services, and how this was highlighted in the Ofsted and Care Quality Commission SEND re-inspection in January 2020. Services across the local area were initially inspected by Ofsted and CQC in November 2017. And whilst this inspection identified a range of strengths, it also identified many areas for development. The inspection team identified 4 specific areas that the council and partners were required to work on, and the establishment of a written statement of action to address local area provision in these areas. Through closely working across the partnership, progress has been made against each of those 4 areas that were covered by the written statement of action. The area has been supported from July 2018 through monitoring and support provisions through specialist advisors from the Department for Education and NHS England, and the last of these visits occurred in November 2019, with progress being reported through to the Department for Education nationally. I'm pleased to say that the outcome of the revisit and the re-inspection in January was that as a local area, we had made sufficient progress against all actions identified in the written statement of action, and Durham was able to evidence significant progress in all of these areas. An outcome letter describing the outputs that the inspection was provided from the lead inspector, and that was published and received by the council in March 2020. That highlighted the progress that had been made and stated that no further monitoring of progress is now planned. Partners are now working on an action plan to further develop local services and to build on the really strong foundation that we've had from the work that's been done over the last couple of years. The recommendations are set out in paragraph 13, and as I said, the re-inspection report that was published in March 2020 identifies a number of areas of really significant progress and is a very positive outcome from this process.
Thank you. Councillor Gunn, please.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet members will recall that our special educational needs disability services across the partnership were first inspected in late November and early December 2017. Now, although there were a number of strengths, there were 4 key areas that inspectors found that further improvement was needed through a written statement of action. And this has been the case in a large number of authorities, including nearly all of those inspected so far in the North East. This is a highly complex area of children and young people's services, and some of our children rely on a range of specialist support services to help them with their education, health and care needs. We want to try and do the very best we can for them and help them prepare for adulthood. Though we have continued to have concerns about the level of resources for us to do that, especially from the high needs block, which we outlined in the previous report. There has been a lot of work across the partnership since the initial inspection. We significantly strengthened our partnership governance, and both the council and the CCG made a number of staffing changes to better support this work. I want to thank everybody who has been involved in that work. It was very pleasing to hear the inspectors from Ofsted and CQC note our genuine commitment to various communication and engagement mechanisms with families, and to see that over 400 parents, carers and young people contributed their feedback during the inspection earlier in the year. I was therefore absolutely delighted to hear that the inspection team found that we'd made sufficient progress across all of the 4 areas that were previously identified. The outcome letter reflects a number of areas where the inspectors saw that positive changes had been made. We're not sitting back on our laurels here. There's clearly more to do. And going forward, we see it as crucial that the needs and views of young people and their families continue to be embedded at the heart of our special educational needs disabilities provision. I welcome the revisit findings and the work now taking place with the partnership on an action plan to further improve our services for our children and young people with special educational needs disabilities across the county. Chair, I move the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gunn. If I can ask Councillor Lucy Hovels, please, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. The report highlights the inspection findings and the significant progress that we've made with our SEND services for vulnerable children and young people. This will be further supported by our closer working with the CCGs through our integrated commissioning developments, where we will be able to put further collective focus on how best we can meet the needs of children and young people with SEND and support those in preparation for adulthood. This morning, it's my pleasure to second the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hobbles. I haven't seen any other indications of anybody who wants to speak. Can I therefore ask if everyone is in agreement with the reports?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We then turn to item number 9 on the agenda, which is discharge of transport functions. If I can ask, please, Amy Harhoff to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. This report relates to the discharge of transport functions of County Durham Council, which are delegated to us initially in 2014 by the North East Combined Authority, and then latterly in 2018 under the North East Transport Joint Committee. The transport provisions in this report largely cover sections 4 and 5 of the Transport Act, and that relates to the provision and support for bus services, for ticketing, and for the National Concessionary Scheme. It's important that we're able to do this as a local authority because it allows us to support the important bus services alongside a joined up approach with regeneration, with our planning and with our overall transport planning functions. And we continue to work in partnership regionally and nationally for those transport priorities that come outside of those provisions, such as major infrastructure investments or improvements to the rail network. In terms of the bus network, in County Durham, we have diverse and complex requirements due to particularly the rural nature of our county, and this allows us to work on the specification locally to manage demand and ensure that the services that are provided are in line with passenger need. Positively, our network provision has largely remained stable since 2012, but we have adapted that where the data and intelligence tells us that demand requires it. The network itself includes just under 23 million passengers per annum. That's of 2019-20. That is a slight decrease on 2018-2019, which may well be largely related to the reductions as a result of COVID, and that's around 2% of passenger numbers. In the previous year, that had been an increase, which is very positive, as that isn't always the trend nationally for bus services. There are two main operators providing services in County Durham, which are Arriva and Go North East, and they cover around 90% of the market, with the remaining services being covered by 3 other operators. The council's role under the Act is largely to provide support for those services which are not commercially provided by the operators, so we work in partnership to understand those gaps on the network and ensure that we get a full network overall, combined with both the commercial operators and with the support that the council provides. This report is a requirement to the Joint Transport Committee, which the council provides on an annual basis. And in Appendix 2 of this report, we set out some of the key priorities and successes that have been delivered over the last year. And in addition to that activity around bus services, I draw your attention to some of the key areas that we have delivered. So particularly with support to women affected by state pension age, the council introduced some additional concessionary support in addition to the normal national concessionary scheme that we are bound to provide. Overall satisfaction levels are quite high across the county, over 90%, and for those areas where satisfaction goes below that level, we work closely with the operators to understand the reasons for that and to improve the overall experience for customers. Our park and ride service in Durham continues to grow, and community transport is particularly critical in providing key services to rural areas. We provide under our responsibilities and work across the council for home school transport, and that includes both the free travel of over 6,500 and pupils in the non-concessionary scheme, with over 3,000 pupils being supported through that. And probably the other key project to highlight within there would be the £15 million almost investment that has happened for Hordern Railway, which we're very pleased to say was opened last week. I know the recommendations of the report are in section 3. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Carl Marshall, please, to speak to the report?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd just like to thank Amy for a very, very comprehensive report to Cabinet this morning. She's covered all of the salient points. Obviously, this is a report that we bring annually into Cabinet under the arrangements with the North East Joint Transport Committee. And we can see from the report that we continue to provide a wide range of transport services to our residents across the county, including subsidised bus services, home to school transport, adult social care transport, and we also participate in several regional schemes as well. I'd also like to pull out that the customer satisfaction for bus services across the county, and just to recognise the satisfaction levels, which in County Durham sit at 92% and is one of the highest nationally. And I think we should take some credence from that. I think the only thing that I've got left to say, Chair, is that I'd like Cabinet just to acknowledge all of the positive work on transport that's going on across the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marshall. Again, if I can ask if anybody else wants to speak to this report, please, to indicate. If not, nobody's indicated. We're asked to note the reports. So if there's no dissent to that, which I haven't heard, we can confirm that the report is noted. So again, obviously, if I can also thank Amy and Councillor Marshall for speaking to that item. If we can move then to item number 10 on the agenda, this is the 2019-20 final outturn for the General Fund and Collection Funds. I'm going to ask John Hewitt, the Corporate Director for Resources, to present the report. I'm then going to bring in Councillor Shuttleworth to ask your question, and we will get the response from that. And I will then ask after that Councillor Napier to speak to the report. So John Hewitt, if you'd like to introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. John Hewitt, Corporate Director Resources. Good morning, members. This report sets out the Council's revenue and capital financial outturn for the 2019-20 financial year, and also details the collection fund position on both business rates and council tax, as well as setting out the Council's reserve position at the end of the year for 2019-20. So I'll just cover the key elements of the report as set out. The revenue budget first. We are reporting a revenue budget overspend of £27,000, which is 0.01% of the revenue budget. The report then goes on to set out the pressures on cash limit budgets during 2019-20 in detail, and in particular sets out pressures in relation to children's services, placement costs and transport costs, but also sets out that we're starting to see financial pressures in many of our frontline service areas. These pressures, specifically around children's services and our frontline services, will need to be closely managed in the current financial year and will be presented to Cabinet as part of the outturn monitoring throughout the remainder of this financial year. In terms of reserves, the overall reserves available for the Council reduced by £5.5 million at 31st of March 2020. The true level of reduction would have been almost £23 million. However, we did have to account for the first tranche of COVID-19 grant in 2019-20, which resulted in a smaller reduction in reserves for the Council. However, that will flow through in the 2020-21 reserves position. And again, Cabinet will need to closely monitor the reserves position, particularly given the uncertainties in relation to future funding and COVID-19 pressures going forward. In terms of capital outturn, the capital expenditure in year amounted to 110 million, which is an underspend of approximately 6.3%. And the relevant adjustments have been made to carry forward specific programmes as required into 2020-21. And finally, on the collection funds for the Council for 2019-20, there is a small surplus on the Council Tax Collection Fund, which the Council will receive 184,000, and there's a surplus on the business rates collection fund, of which the council's share is 4.8 million, and again that's planned into the 2021 budget. The recommendations, Chair, are set out in paragraph 7 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for that. I'm now going to ask Councillor Shuttleworth, please, to ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Some 2 years ago, the then Head of Technical Services put forward £500,000 for medium-term financial plan savings coming from the Winter Maintenance Reserve. And the question I want to ask is, why has there been a necessity to draw down a further 612,000 from that budget to offset an in-year overspend when we actually had the mildest winter for probably 10 years? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Shuttleworth. I'm going to ask Councillor Stevens, as the appropriate portfolio holder, to answer that question. Councillor Stevens.
Morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Brian Stevens, and I have the portfolio for neighbourhoods and partnerships. Can I thank Councillor Shuttleworth for his question this morning? The provision of winter maintenance is a statutory obligation. The cost of the service is driven by weather and is delivered in accordance with the winter maintenance policy. Although the perception of the winter season was that it was mild, our winter maintenance activity actually increased by approximately 25% over that previous winter of 2018-19, operating under the same policy. The revenue budget for winter maintenance is supported by earmarked reserves to balance out pressures across winter seasons of varying activities. Once again, can I thank Councillor Shuttleworth for his question, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stevens, for that answer. I'm now going to ask Councillor Napier to speak to the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As the Corporate Director of Resources has set out, our revenue outturn position for 2019-20 is showing a small overspend position of 0.01% of the budget. Whilst this is a small overspend, it does demonstrate that keeping spending within budget is getting harder every year, and it is directly related to operating under the pressure of 10 years of austerity. General reserves have also reduced by £5.5 million. However, this figure would have been a high reduction of £22.5 million had it not been for how COVID-19 grant had been accounted for. Again, this demonstrates how challenging the financial landscape is for local government at this point in time. Our capital programme has again been well managed, with spending of £110 million in 1920 as we look to continue our significant capital investment across the county. The collection fund position for business rates and council tax was positive for 2019-20. However, this is an area we will need to monitor very closely during the current financial year, given the significant impact of COVID-19. Chairman, I would like to thank all of the staff that have worked diligently to ensure we can report a positive financial position yet again for 2019-20. It is clear, however, from this report that things are getting very, very difficult. I once again have to finish by asking all of my council colleagues of whatever political persuasion to join me in seeking a fair funding settlement that is based on need going forward. Without this, I fear for the future of services in our council and many more up and down the country. Chairman, I move the recommendations as set out.
Thank you very much, Councillor Napier. I will be seconding this report, and I'm very happy to second this item, detailing the final outturn for the General Fund and Collection Fund for 2019-20. The total net spend, as we've heard, was almost exactly on budget, with a 7.5 million underspend on the capital programme. Can I thank all staff from Resources involved in the finalisation of the annual accounts, and indeed all staff across the council for meeting in terms of the final outturn, the budget figure for the year, which, as we all know, is increasingly challenging in the current circumstances. The report in front of us is extremely detailed. It includes summaries for each service grouping, the dedicated schools grants, the capital programme, and also council tax and business rates collection funds. In this time of great uncertainty, it is likely that the current year's budget, 2021, will be even more challenging, and that is something, of course, we will be monitoring closely in the months ahead. So with that, I second the recommendations in paragraphs 7 to 8. Can I ask if there's anybody else who wishes to come in on this report and to indicate if so? If not, the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Can those be agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, and thank you again to Councillor Shuttleworth for the question. We then move on to item 11 on the agenda, the impact of COVID-19 on local bus services in County Durham. And again, if I can ask Amy Harhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an overview of the impact that the coronavirus pandemic has had in terms of the demand on bus services in the region, and sets out some of the financial support that the council have been making alongside national government providers to try and maintain the provision on the network. I think critical to this is to highlight that not only is this about the provision of transport services, but the critical role that transport plays in broader social mobility to reduce isolation and critically to ensure access to employment, particularly for a number of our key workers, where that continued provision of bus services has been vital during the pandemic. Bus services are facing an incredibly challenging time due to the significant reductions in passenger demand as a result of the restrictions, including aspects such as social distancing and general discouragement from using public transport. In terms of numbers, that's an overall, as of mid-June, was up to 90% reduction in passenger numbers over the period from the end of March to the middle of June, which was around 5 million less passenger trips than we would have otherwise expected to see during that period. Despite those significant reductions, a service has been maintained on the network of up to around 40%, and that has included a reduction often of services to an hourly service, but where possible have looked to try and maintain the coverage of the network and working with operators and with partners to understand where those critical services are and ensure that provision is still made. In table 1, section 23 of the report, we set out the funding that has been available. This includes both the existing bus services operator grant and the national concessionary funding, which is maintained. And in addition to this, there has been some national government additional support, which has gone to operators to maintain both the services, but critically the overall viability of bus companies during this pandemic to ensure that our bus services are still there for us throughout. The council have agreed to continue to work with the operators. There are a number of measures that we put in place. We work collaboratively to agree the services and to inform the shape of what's provided for customers. We will amend the network as the evidence shows and be continually informed by the needs of customers. We will continue to look for central funding to support our vital bus services, and we'll continue to also show that we are ensuring good value for the services that are supported. And we continue to work across the North East for the cross-boundary services. It is likely that the issues will continue, certainly for the foreseeable future, and that further funding will be required. It's with that, Chair, that I highlight that section 9 of this report identifies the recommendations for members.
Thank you very much. Can I again ask Councillor Carl Marshall, please, to speak to the report?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'd just like to start by thanking all of our bus operators who have operated throughout the lockdown period, Go North East Arriva and the smaller operators who work tirelessly keeping our key workers connected during this global pandemic. I think, Chair, in County Durham, obviously bus services are absolutely vital. We know that 27% of our residents living across the county don't have any car ownership in their household. And I think that, you know, the role that bus services play in keeping our communities connected, preventing social isolation, and as part of the recovery, the role they'll play in improving access into our towns and communities across the county is going to be absolutely vital. As a council, we've worked very closely with the North East Bus Partnership and colleagues across the Joint Transport Committee in the region to lobby government, and the government, in fairness, and I'm thankful for the funding the government put into bus operators to ensure that that connectivity for our residents and communities was maintained, alongside the funding that we've continued to make payments on as an authority. But that funding doesn't go far enough. There's only a commitment from government until August, and I'll continue to work on behalf of the council and our communities across the county to make sure the government steps up and continues to fund our bus operators in a more sustained way going forward. I think everything else has been said, Chair, so I'd just like to formally endorse the approach that the council's taken and formally move the recommendations as has been outlined within the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marshall. Can I ask Councillor Kevin Shaw, please, to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kevin Shaw, Cabinet Member for Strategic Housing and Assets. I can't emphasise enough the importance of bus services for our county. It's essential that the council plays its part in creating viable urban and rural communities where people want to live and where they can gain access to key services, and bus services are an essential lifeline to many of our residents. I fully support the recommendation to continue to support bus operators at this time when the services are simply not operationally viable to run due to reduced passenger numbers and social distancing measures. Very happy to support the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaw. Again, if I can ask if there's anyone else who wishes to come in on the report, please. I can't see anybody indicating. The recommendations, as has been stated, are set out in paragraph 9. Can I ask if there is agreement to the recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 12, any other business? There is no other business in this part of the meeting. So I need to move on to item 13, which is resolution to exclude the press and public. Can I ask for a mover, please?
Move the necessary resolution, Chairman.
Thank you. And a seconder to that?
I'll second it, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I have agreement to that, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. Before we move into the private part of the meeting, can I thank everyone for taking part? And to those members of the public and media who have watched the meeting. I advise that concludes the business for the open part of the meeting.